All right, we're going to talk about calipers. Calipers are a tool that are used for measuring and laying out parts onto projects. So what is this tool here? You may have guessed that it's a caliper based on what we're talking about. But just know that these, in addition, are calipers as well. So we have our dial caliper, and that's going to be the one that we use the most here in the shop. We also have a digital caliper that is very similar to the dial caliper, except for it displays its units in a digital format rather than analog that you have to count. We have an inside caliper that would be used good for measuring inside distances, maybe the inside diameter of a circle, things like that. Outside calipers would be used for measuring thicknesses of material or diameters of circles. These two here would have to be put up to a tape measure to come up with the size that you've measured. These two are better for transferring. Maybe you want to take this size over to another project and check and verify. The outside caliper or inside caliper would work for that. But if you wanted to get an actual measurement off the caliper, you'd have to take this to a tape measure. So what we're going to focus on today is our dial caliper. And so there's a few ways to measure with the dial caliper or a digital caliper. Either one of those would be the same process. The first is going to be by measuring the outside caliper, or using the outside jaws to measure outside thicknesses. So we could use it like this to measure a thickness. We could use it like this to measure the outside diameter of a circle, whatever it may be. The next way to measure things is going to be the inside measurement, and that's going to be these back jaws that you kind of see here or right here, and they're going to spread open and will give us the inside measurement of smaller things that you cannot get the jaws into otherwise. And then lastly would be with this little tail that shoots out the bottom of the caliper. Now this is going to be used for measuring like depths of holes and things like that, where you line this edge of the caliper up even with your workpiece, and that little indicator there sits on the bottom surface that you're trying to measure, and then the dial will give you the correct readout of the size. So we can measure outside thicknesses, inside measurements, as well as how deep something is, or small protrusions into material with that little tail that comes out the bottom. So a couple parts of the caliper you need to be aware of. We have the outside measuring jaws, which we talked about, the inside measuring jaws. We have the outer ring is in hundredths of an inch. And then we have our dial face rotator for zeroing out. So if we look in real close here, there's kind of a little indication or a little part that sticks out. It's got a little bit of jagged edges on there, so you could grab it with your fingernail. And before you start using a caliper, you want these jaws to be pushed together, and this needle should be pointing right at zero. Now this backer face may be turned a little bit. Your zero might be over here, and that's fine, but your dial and your indicator need to be lined up to zero when the jaws are pushed together. It doesn't matter the orientation. Zero could be down here, zero could be over to the side. It doesn't matter where zero is facing, but the needle does need to be pointed right at zero. If it's not, you want to grab this little edge on the glass here, and with your thumb or finger, and just slide that over until the needle is even with the zero. This little gray or black piece here also moves. This is not the piece that you're moving. If you grab this here, the whole glass piece will come off of the caliper, and it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get put back together. What we're grabbing is this little tiny little indent here with the little jagged marks on there, so you can grab it with your fingernail and push it over. So once you've zeroed it out and you're ready to measure, we're going to look mainly at the face of the caliper and the sizes. Now, as indicated on the last screen, our standard unit here is 0.01, or tens hundredth of an inch. So we have tens, hundreds. So each one of these is 100th of an inch. So as we count over, this would be 0.01, 0.02, 0.03, 0.04, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You can see that every 10 are indicated with a little bit thicker line and the decimal equivalent there. So rather than having to count all the way across over to the other side, you can come to the nearest 10 and then count forward or backwards to find your size. Typically, we're not looking at the inside ring. We're looking at the outside markings for what we're doing. So let's take a look at a couple of markings here. And first, we're going to look here at this indicator. And so if we count over, we don't have to count from 0 because we know that these are accurate. So 10, 11, 12. We would have 0.12 for our answer for this marking right here. Okay, let's take a look at another one. Down here, so we're at 0.6 is our nearest whole number, and then we can count over. So 0.60, 0.61, 0.62, 0.63. So our answer would be 0.63. Let's take a look at one more. And if we come up here to the top, now we could count all the way over, but that's a lot of extra counting. We could look at this as 0.90 and count backwards. So this would be 0.89, 0.88. So 0.88 is where we're indicating to right here. Hopefully this is not too difficult for you to understand. If you do have questions on this, please come see me during class or shoot me an email and we'll discuss this further to help you better understand this. So now when we're actually measuring things, this screw here, for example, we're measuring and we can see this whole number here. So this is telling us that we're greater than 1 inch. If we were between these numbers, we'd be less than 1 inch. But since we're over here greater than 1 inch, we know we're going to have a whole number in front of our decimal. So we should have a reading of 1 point, here's 0.5, so 4948. 1.48 is the length of this screw. Now some calipers may have markings in between here. Each one of these every 10 hundredths of an inch might be laid out here. So you might have a marking there, a marking there, a marking there, so on until you get to the 1 inch. Now this, you will notice as you spin this around, our caliper takes one full rotation to get to 1 inch. So as you're opening this up, we should be one rotation plus about a half for this measurement. Let's take a look at another one. Let's take a look at this washer. Now we can see that the 1 inch mark is right there. So we're almost 1 inch. Now that dot might not be very precisely put on there. We might be a little bit to one side or the other, but what we're really looking at is the dial. So looking at this dial, I would say that we're right about 1 inch, but we're just slightly smaller. I wouldn't say that we're a whole unit smaller, but we're almost in between that. So when you get near a whole number, you'll need to look and see. So because we're on this back side of the 1, we know that we're going to be at just slightly under 1 inch, not slightly over. If it was on the other side of the 0, then we'd know we are over 1 inch. But because it's on the back side of it, we know that we're going to be at 1 inch or just slightly below, depending on how you read that caliper. So if you have any questions on reading a caliper and what each of those markings mean, please come see me, send me an email, let's chat about this. We're going to move on and we're going to do the caliper worksheet. So go ahead and get that worked on in Google Classroom.